Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's live webcast. Tonight I have prepared for you a tips and tricks session where I want to show you some of the capture features that are perhaps less frequently used or less obvious to find. Before we do that, however, I have a few things I would like to mention, beginning with the imagery that you saw running up to the live webcast. These are pictures that were sent in from Dave Cools in Belgium or Netherlands. I'm sorry, I forgot that detail. Dave might not be aware of this, but he's been selected for our promoted showcases section. This means Dave has won himself an upgrade to Capture 2020 once that is available, so an early Christmas present. Thank you, Dave, for submitting this. This is from the HIM's New Year's evening show, the 2018/2019 New Year's Eve. We encourage all our users to participate in our promoted showcase program. You can read more about this on our website if you click on the showcase section in the top menu of the website. Moving on, we are happy to announce or share with you that SGM in Germany have decided to run their New Talents Award competition this year as well. So the applications are open, I believe, now for the New Talents Award 2019. This is a great opportunity for the young and upcoming lighting designer to show off his skills to a wider audience. If you are selected among the 3 finalists, you have the opportunity to come to Cologne in Germany and participate in the finals, which are live broadcasted and promoted in social media and possibly even some printed media. Apart from the fame and glory of being one of the 3 finalists, there are also some great prizes to be won, including capture licenses and some gear from ETC as well. We will be sharing with you the link to the competition's website. I received a question even before we started here, whether I could explain more about the SGM show contest. Specifically, whether it's for the recording of a real show or a 3D show, that is a visualized show. Now, I may be wrong, but unless they've changed something from last year, it's fine to submit your submission either as a recording of a live show or a recording of a visualization, or possibly even as sketches, but I don't think that would work well for you. So if you basically send in your submission of any lighting design that you would like to compete with, and if you are then chosen among the 3 finalists, you are then handed a song and a specific rig which you are asked to program a show for. So the 3 finalists compete with a design for the same piece of music using the same rig in the SGM demo room in Cologne, where I will also be present to congratulate you and give you your capture prizes if you get there and win. Moving on, we have an important OS release coming up from Apple. I believe the latest news is that it will be available in October. It's macOS 10.15 Catalina. In this version of macOS, Apple have made some security enhancements to protect their users, that is you, from fraudulent software hacks and cracks and things like this, which protects us too, obviously. As a part of this, there are some new software requirements in play, and we are going to be releasing a 2019.2 release of Capture, possibly this week or maybe next week, that meets these requirements. So if you are one of those enthusiasts that download and run the beta software prior to the release, make sure that you also get Capture 2019 Mark II once that is out, because that will run better for you on Catalina. So that's it for the news segment, and we will be moving on to the main feature of today, which is tips and tricks in Capture 2019. As usual, I ask you, you are more than welcome to write any questions you have in the comments field below the video. I'm getting the questions relayed here so I can answer them as I go, hopefully, depending on whether it's related to what I'm talking about right at the moment or not. I have one question already from Tao. I am going to do my first little demo here. I have about 10-15 things I can go through depending on what happens throughout the webcast. So I'll do the first one before I start answering any questions. So let's bring in Capture here. I'm running 2019, of course. And the first thing I want to show you is a feature for the camera. It's available in the camera sub-menu here, and it's called Swing to Selection. I have prepared a file to demonstrate what this feature does. We have here a stage. We have 4 boxes at the upstage side. We have a curtain behind them, a shrubbery and a tree, and most importantly, there is a piece of triangle truss construction rigged here. Now, what makes this interesting is that the truss is also tilted. So the upstage edge is lower than the downstage edge. Now, rigging anything on tilted truss constructions or tilted or rotated or off-angle constructions can be challenging. For one thing, as I'm viewing this triangle truss from above now, I basically see 2 main pipes, whereas in reality there are 3 in the triangle truss, and it's simply that 2 of them are vertically lined, I suppose you could say. Either way, we have created this Swing to Selection feature so that you can adjust the camera angle to something that has been rotated. So what I do here is I select one object that I would like to align to. In this case, I chose the back truss section. Then I use the camera Swing to Selection, which brings me this view. Now, if you look carefully at it, you can see that I'm now viewing the truss construction as if it had never been tilted in the first place. If you look at the way the cube is oriented in the view here, you can see we are no longer in a plane top view. If I zoom out a bit, you can also see that we are watching the curtain not from the top, but at a slight angle. This is very convenient because now if I start adding fixtures, let's go for an A ladder, I can now clearly distinguish between the 3 pipes I can snap to. The lower one is the one in the middle, so it's easy for me to control exactly what I'm snapping to. Of course, Capture still snaps the fixtures hanging straight down, so that hasn't changed. But if I now start adding more fixtures, another benefit is that features like moving things while holding shift works. And if I now move something what appears to be in the plane of the truss construction, you can see in the section view here that the movement is actually what appears as diagonal. Now I could also choose another truss section here and align the camera to that using Swing to Selection, which has now even rotated, in a sense, the entire view. So not only does it tackle a tilted truss, but it also tackles rotated objects. Now this is great because I can use tools like the like movement and rotation and treat the truss construction as if I had never done weird things with it in the first place. So the question from Tao Wang, where can I record a show use cameras in different views in Capture? I'm going to have to interpret that question a little bit. I have two possible interpretations. One is that you can use the 5 user-storable camera positions in the view. So let's try it out. Let's store camera position 1. Let's move the camera. Let's rotate the camera. Let's store camera position 2. Now I can go back to camera position 1 or back to camera position 2. Now these are camera positions you can work with while you're designing. If you want to do things like movie renders with camera tracks, camera transitions, then you need to patch the camera to DMX. That is something I will not cover right here, right now, but we'll see if we can find a link to a resource that explains it well. So we have a couple of more questions from Holger and Felix. I'm going, though, to proceed with, how much can I improvise here? I will confuse myself. Right, so I have 2 great questions from Holger and Felix, which I'm going to pause a moment and move on down my predefined path here. So the next thing I want to show you is related to colors and color programming in your lighting design. I have a project file here that we're actually using in the tutorial series that we will be releasing within short. And in this design, I have 2 BB7s rigged upstage. And you can see they are both using colors. The leftmost is in all green, and the rightmost has different colors actually in all of the apertures. Now, in the views category of the design tab, under the alpha view column, as we are looking at the alpha view here, we have a setting called Hue Clamp. So what does Hue Clamp do? Let me show you first. Now we have no Hue Clamp, and now we have maximum Hue Clamp. Look at how the colors of the apertures change as I adjust the Hue Clamp. When Hue Clamp is at a minimum, then the views in Capture basically behave like that of any digital camera. Now, if we take a look at a couple of photos that I have honestly borrowed from the internet. Here is one with a lot of fixtures. They have red beams, but if you look at the apertures, they are all white. I have another photo that illustrates the same type of situation. We have white lights. Obviously, the fixtures are white, but, whoa, sorry. If we look closely at the fixture with the blue beam, even that has a white aperture. And the reason is this is standard behavior of digital cameras, and this change of color to white is something we've learned to interpret as a signal of intensity. So whenever we see this, we kind of understand that this is a very strong beam, and our brain stitches together the last piece of information, and we understand that it's blue even though the aperture appears white because we can see the rest of the beam. Now, of course, there are cases where we don't have a lot of atmosphere, and then it gets trickier because then you have no additional information to help you understand the true color here. So in those cases, it's very useful to have this fake-looking type of view that still retains the color information, especially if you're programming like LED pixel mapping things. Then setting a higher Hue Clamp makes it much easier to understand what's happening when you're looking at the apertures of fixtures. So let's, those are great questions. So I'm going to answer the question from Ronnie here. Ronnie is asking whether he can put cable path in the drawing. Now, we don't have any tools in Capture to draw cable paths. You could work around it using some of the other shapes and forms in the library. I've seen people use the boxes and arcs to create sort of curves and lines, but it's a crude workaround. The best thing you can do really is use some of the generic symbols to simply add points of information, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Nick is also asking when he can ask questions not related to the tips and tricks session, and you can do that at any point really. I'll try and squeeze in your questions between the things I want to show you, but if you have more questions than I have things to show you, I will be answering your questions. They are more relevant tonight, I think. And if there's not enough time today, there's always another webcast, so we'll find a way. So I'll squeeze in another question before I go on. Felix Scheib is asking whether we will implement GDTF and MVR support in a later release. Now, whatever I say today may change in a month or in a year, of course, but at the moment we have no plans for neither. GDTF does not really add any substantial benefit to any of our users. It's a file format that is missing too much information that Capture needs. Having said that, Atlabase, our library partner, they could benefit from loading GDTF files during the library creation process. So while we may not add it in Capture for you to use, it might still be used by the Atlabase staff. And as for MVR, that format unfortunately is based on some very old technology plus GDTF, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. We have some other exciting developments that are in a related area that we will be announcing a little bit later, but basically there is another format that we are going to be moving towards that does the same thing, but even more of it. So, let's proceed with something more from my list here. I want to show you some things about multi-selection editing. So I have a project file here. It's our standard demo project, Chateau, which has a few layers in it. So it's a good example. Now, I'm sure you know that in Capture, if you select multiple objects and use selected items, then you are basically editing them all at the same time. But we have a few other views, like the layers category, which works differently. But there is still some multi-selection editing present here that I want to show you. So one good example is the locked column. Locking a layer prevents you from accidentally moving things in it, so it can be quite interesting to lock quite a lot of layers at the same time. Double-clicking them one by one, yeah, that works, but it's not great. One step better is to use the keyboard, the arrow and return buttons, but even that gets tedious. So use multi-select by clicking and using the Shift or Control on Windows, Command on Mac keys to select a range of layers. Now you have a choice. You can use the return key on the keyboard and edit them all at the same time. You can also use the mouse, but on Windows, for instance, if you forget to keep the Shift key pressed when you do this, you will end up deselecting them. So on Windows, if you double-click, remember to keep the Shift key down from after the multi-selection. Otherwise, this happens. Also keep in mind that these columns sort. So imagine now, for instance, that I have a few layers locked and I want to unlock them all. I could go and select them one by one, but there's an easier way, and that is to sort by the locked column. This brings them all together. Then it's much easier to do a multi-selection and double-click. And this works for the other properties as well, such as color. So if you want to make multiple layers blue, yeah, now I forgot to hold the Shift key. So you can easily do multi-selection editing of colors, the paperweight, or anything here. And this is great also when editing filters, because you can select multiple layers here and hide and show them all at the same time. So this is very powerful and something you might not have even thought of to try, but it's a real time saver if you have a lot of layers. Now I want to move on and show you something about video players. This is a simple but important one. In the Media tab in Capture, we have, well, a lot of different things, but one of them is the video players. I have one here already, so I'm going to delete it so we start from scratch. So if you add a video player, you can add multiple video files to it. And this way you can build a playlist of video, and you can hook it up to materials and video projectors and some fixtures that have built-in video panels as well. Now I have a fixture here, a video projector. It is this one here. And by the way, we have new symbols for video projectors in the library. So this is the new generic video projector symbol, which is quite an upgrade from the previous one. Anyway, projector, media property, video player. Now if I start playback of a video here, okay, it's not very bright. Let's adjust the brightness setting a bit, or rather the exposure here. So now we have a video projector playing back video. I've built myself a mini playlist with 2 videos. Now if you have a longer video clip that's playing, you may even want to be lighting sub-segments of the video. And it's great to know that although the button says add video files, it actually accepts images too. So you can load an image, maybe one that represents a typical frame of a video for a song, and keep that static so that if you're rendering images, for instance, you don't get a random frame from the video, or of course you could play back a video, you could wait for the right moment and hit pause, but if it's 2 minutes into the video, yeah. So load images into the video player if you don't have the videos, or if you want to lock them to a specific frame. I have a few questions here. I'm going to answer Nick Vetter's question at this point because I think now works. Nick is asking, if you have a few fixtures that do not behave as intended in real life, well, washes being beams the other way around, etc., whether we can send email to support with all the fixture problems encountered, or whether it needs to be done one at a time. Now, you can do either, but it does help us if you separate them fixture by fixture, because sometimes, or it's easier for us to process the whole request before we reply, and maybe we're done with one of them before the 2 others. So if you break it down into separate requests, you might get, we might help you to progress with one of them, and then you might have to wait for the others. But yeah, sometimes they share properties and information, so it's really up to you how you want to do it. But it's good for us if you can split it up in multiple ones. So I shall move on a little bit to the library tab, and then I will also get to the answer of Holger's question. In the library tab, where I'm sure you have been many times, I want to point out that under symbols, we have a category called generic. The generic symbols aren't necessarily fixture symbols, but other items like the rigging points, the sightline, as well as, for instance, the information sign. So this is a great way of adding extra information to your plot. This could be cabling information, for instance. And we can add text as well by using the annotation property of the symbol. So if we want to use the pink SOCAPEX here, I can enter that, and the information appears on the plot. You can also use, for instance, the scale property here. And the scale can also be adjusted through plot styles. So there is some flexibility to the information of the plot. So remember, there are more than just fixture symbols, under symbols in the library. Now Holger is asking whether he can add additional items to the report that shows truss elements such as couplers or other elements that are not part of our standard library. And yes, you can. We have an item in the built-in category here, which is called the, sorry for scrolling so fast, the report item. Now, a report item is anything you want to appear on a report that didn't come out of our standard library. So let's take a look here at the first pipe, LX1. Let's add a report item. Imagine that we need 2 extra slings here for this pipe for whatever reason. Now under the report item properties, I could enter sling. Let's say we need 3 of them, and they each weigh 1.5 kilo. This information now appears on the equipment report. So if I open that and scroll down a bit, then under the other section you can see it now says 3 slings at a total of 4.5 kilo. This also works with the locations report. However, I have to pay attention because I inserted it at ground level, so I need to move it up close to the actual pipe so that it picks up the location. And now under LX1 we have the 3 slings. So yes, you can use the report item from the library to add additional things in the report that didn't otherwise come from the library. So moving on, sorry. We have a question from Raphael. He's asking whether he can use his license both on his previous Mac and also on his MacBook on the go. Yes, you can. If you purchase a capture license, you are good to use it on 2 computers. We also understand that as time progresses, you purchase new computers, you might have to reinstall computers and so on. This is perfectly normal. I would also like to point out that if you have a machine where you don't actually need to do editing, like you have simply a visualizer machine where you don't actually edit the show, then that could be running the demo version of Capture as a viewer. And you can also use the presentation files to your advantage and export a presentation file and use that as a viewer. So there's quite a few options available. Let's move on. The next thing I want to show you is very simple. If you go to the Help menu of Capture and open the About dialog, you can see the version of Capture you're using. What I want to show you is this little segment down here. Now this is particularly interesting on Windows if you have multiple graphics cards, for instance. Here you can see which graphics card Capture is actually using. Now if you have a laptop with a discrete card, that is, like you have the Intel chip in the laptop plus an NVIDIA or an AMD card in there, then sometimes you need to go into Windows and configure which of them you want to use with Capture. And this is where you can check for real which one Capture is actually using. It's also worth to pay attention to the driver date. Shame on me. My driver is from 2018. That's no good. If I were to mail support and they asked me which driver I'm using, the first thing they would say is I should update my driver. Now, it's worth updating the driver not just if you're having issues, but also for performance reasons. Often newer drivers can offer better performance than older ones, especially if you're running, let's say, the first driver that shipped with the hardware, then you are more likely to get better performance with the driver that came a few months later. While we are up in the menu looking at things, let's also look at the options available under the Tools menu. The number one option I want to show you is the one down here. It's called Locked Layers Unselectable. Now I have enabled it here. It's not enabled by default. What it does is it makes sure that objects in layers that are locked cannot be selected. So let's lock the fixtures layer. Now I've made all my fixtures blue, so let's use a paperwork view. Now whenever I try to click on a fixture, nothing happens, because these fixtures are in a locked layer, and locked layers are now unselectable. So locking layers is great to prevent accidental modification. Making them unselectable also helps when there is a lot of clutter in the view and it's, there are many lines to click on and you don't want to be selecting the scenery, for instance. So you put the scenery in a locked layer and make it unselectable. Now, please, if you have any more questions, do go on writing them in the comments field and I shall try and answer them as soon as possible. I don't have that much time left for tonight. The next thing I want to show you is related to Dmx Rotation of Objects. I'm going to open a project file again from the upcoming tutorial series. Here we have Daisy on stage. She's about to be beamed up by a UFO. Now in the upcoming tutorial, I do show how to use the Dmx rotator to achieve rotation controlled by Dmx. But the question we get ever so frequently is whether it has a continuous rotation mode. Because, now let's connect, actually it's not Daisy, is it? She has horns. But she can identify as whatever she wants, that's fine. Let's connect Daisy to the motion fixture I just added, the rotator. Now the rotator has a fixed range, or it's, you can change the range, but from a Dmx standpoint it is fixed. And if I patch it to a Dmx universe, you can see it uses 2 Dmx channels, so it's in fact it's a single 16-bit angle channel. Now you could, on the lighting console, possibly do a chase or an effect that ramps the value from 0 up to max and then jumps back to the 0 value and achieve a continuous rotation that way. But we do have a specific Dmx mode. So apart from just the alpha angle, there is also alpha and speed. So if I change to this mode, you can see now in the Dmx universe that we have the 16-bit angle and a 16-bit speed. Now as long as speed is at 0, the angle works just as before. But the moment you give a speed value, it starts rotating continuously. Now here's a little trick. I don't have a lighting console set up at the moment, and the capture control pane doesn't give me access to the speed channels, but I can use a dimmer channel, put it on the same channel as the speed channel, and then use that to set the Dmx value. So as you can see here now, Daisy is in a constantly spinning mode, since I've got a speed value on that speed channel in the universe. So I'm showing you both continuous rotation and how to abuse the fixture patch to force DMX values into channels otherwise not accessible. Now we apologize to Daisy for this dizzy state and give her a break. I have a question from Jelly, or Gel, whether we have any plans on improving the recording feature if there's also video that needs to be recorded. I've had to use lower resolution video to get smooth DMX recording. So, great question. If you have especially high resolution video or a lot of DMX things happening, then the performance of your computer while you are recording the snapshot can impact the quality of the snapshot. This is something we are working pretty hard on eradicating in an upcoming capture version, but my recommendation at the moment would be, if you can, don't even have a live view open when you are recording the snapshot. If that's not an option, at least make sure you're running on lower visualization settings so that you're not on, on a high setting that is giving you a low frame rate, because this could also impact things. Yeah, that's about my two best tricks at the moment. So, long answer made shorter. Yes, we are working on the recording feature by making sure that performance cannot affect it. Well, so Nick Vedder is also asking here, when will we be able to rotate an object without needing to use DMX? So we introduced this new control pane in Capture 2019, and we are working on improving it for Capture 2020. I can't say for sure yet which specific controls will go in there because we're not done with it yet. But some things we are definitely looking at are things like continuous gobo rotation, Dmx strobe modes, multiple editing of more properties and parameters. So this is definitely something we are working on, yes. Gel or Jelly is writing that I indeed record in wireframe only, but more than one full HD runs into problems. It may also depend actually on what type of full HD you're using, whether it's the video player or whether it's coming in as a stream. I would encourage you to drop us a mail at support@capture.se and reference this conversation in the webcast, because I would like to ask a few follow-up questions. Luis Fernando is asking whether we can add layer scaffolding to the library and or other types of pre-built stages. This is not offered in the library at the moment, and we are in fact currently investigating the best way to move forward so that we give you the most usable approach to scaffolding in Capture, a good balance between ultra-detailed report counting individual scaffolding items to pre-built constructions. But this is not something we have ready yet. Continuing with your great questions, please do carry on. We have time for a few more. John Rosley is asking, he's curious about the FXAA license that we mentioned in the About dialog here. FXAA AA is short for anti-aliasing, and this is an anti-aliasing method or algorithm that is run on the graphics card to smoothen out jagged pixel edges in the visualization, and it's kindly licensed by NVIDIA for use by anyone who replicates this copyright message in the software. So it's an anti-aliasing of the views, and I do believe, yes. So if you turn on or off the anti-aliasing option, It's probably hard to see over the webcast, but maybe on the YouTube webcast, which is full HD, if you look at the edges of this self-lit surface on the UFO, you can see the difference when I turn on and off anti-aliasing, and this is in fact referencing the FXAA anti-aliasing. So it seems I got through the list of things I wanted to show you and managed to answer quite a few questions. There are still some more coming in here. Will we have a warning on double patching DMX in the next version? I can't tell you for sure. What I can say is that we are well aware that many users are asking for this, while some have also told us that they would find it utterly annoying. But we will try and find a good solution that satisfies everyone. Frank Baum is asking whether multiple GPUs like SLI or Crossfire are options for a later release. I would say no, but yes. So the specific technologies of SLI and Crossfire are losing their relevance today in that applications can gain access to the individual graphics card and take full control over how they are used. SLI and Crossfire does limit the application in some sense and isn't very flexible. What we are looking into is ways of using more than one GPU at the same time, for instance by doing some calculations on one card in good time for the next frame on the next card. This can get quite complicated, but it is getting very interesting today, not only because SLI and Crossfire, but also because many computers have an Intel and an NVIDIA, or an Intel and an AMD card, or you buy a MacBook laptop and you have an eGPU, and in theory Capture could be using all of these GPUs at the same time. It will heat your room quite nicely, probably, but if we can find good ways of doing that, then we could boost the performance a bit, yes. But for now, I wouldn't invest heavily in any Crossfire or SLI system, actually. I would rather put the money in a good single GPU card. So, having said that, thank you so much for watching us tonight. See you soon again. For our next live webcast, I'm going to prepare a bit of networking information. We're going to try and provide some solid advice on how to use ArtNet and streaming ACN and CITP, and what the most common issues you might run into, and try to demystify the thing a little bit. So thank you so much for watching tonight. Thank you for all your great questions, and see you soon again.